Hey there, welcome back to the channel, and thanks for joining me. Today we're talking about a watch from IWC's not too distant past. This is a Fliegerchronograph known as the reference 3706. This is a watch that was produced from 1994 to 2005. This watch represents one of my favorite eras from IWC and embodies a lot of qualities that I would like to see modern IWC embrace. Now, I first want to mention a reference that was released alongside this watch, the 3705. And the 3706 often lives in the shadow of that watch, as the 3705 was an early watch to be released in black ceramic. This was a relatively exotic watch in its day, and it's a watch that has a little bit more legend and lore around it, to the extent that IWC even made a tribute to 3705 a few years back, made from ceratanium. Which is an excellent watch, and 3705 is as well. There are only around 1,000 examples of the 3705 produced, so they are a bit expensive and a bit difficult to come by. The 3706, however, is far more accessible. These can be had for under $3,000. And it's largely the same watch, but it uses a steel case. It's every bit as good in my mind and deserves a little more appreciation than I think it gets these days. The 3706 uses a 39mm case. It is 14.7 millimeters thick and 47.1 millimeters from lug to lug. It's a bit tanky in its proportions, but it's very easy to wear. This watch uses a heavily modified version of the Valjoux 7750, which is placed inside of a Faraday cage inside the case, which adds to a bit of the thickness there. The overall design of this watch is very sober and straightforward. There's nothing flashy about this watch. It's all very utilitarian almost in approach. The dial is not quite flat black. It's almost like a very dark gray. The numerals on early examples are tritium. However, on this example, they are a more traditional superluminova. The typeface for the hour markers is almost like an Arial type default font that you would find in Microsoft Word or something. And everything is situated in a very easy to use manner. One thing I love about this watch is the handset. The squared off hour hand and the pencil minute hand just work fabulously well. And I strongly prefer this shape of hand to the broadsword hands that we see used on modern day pilot chronograph watches from IWC. That's a personal preference, but they just feel a little bit less flashy and a little bit more straightforward, like they respect you a little bit more or something. Overall, this is a clinically clean approach to design on the dial, and it works exceptionally well. There's no pretension about this. There's no unnecessary or frivolous details thrown in here. Everything is hyper-focused on exactly what it needs to be and nothing more. And that comes right down to the case and its size as well. There's no strange polished surfaces here. It feels like a proper tool watch. Now, I have no doubt that modern IWC watches are just as, if not more, capable of taking a beating or anything that you're going to subject these watches to just as much as this watch. There's no subcontext of luxury here. There's no real need to tie it into any historical elements. It just feels like happenstance or a natural evolution. So it's not trying to be anything other than what it is. And this is from an era when tool watches' reputations were tied to their performance, not whose wrists they were spotted on and not what it sold for at the last auction. And there's something very refreshing about that, and it really comes through in this watch and a lot of other tool watches from this era. If there's one gripe that I have with this watch, and even a few other watches from this era, to be perfectly honest, it's the domed crystal. This crystal picks up every reflection around it. It's quite difficult to photograph and video, which is less of a big deal, but walking around outside on a bright day or anything like that, it's almost difficult to see into the crystal. I'd really love to see a modern modification for these watches that brought a flat crystal that you could easily see through. That also happens to be my biggest issue with the Sinn Easy M1. You can barely see into the thing, and it kind of runs counter to the purpose of these watches, which is to be highly legible, easy to use at a glance, and nothing more. So it's a small issue that has kind of a big impact on how often you might want to wear this watch. That issue alone probably makes this a watch that I wear far less than I otherwise would, because everything else about this watch hits so well. It does sit up a little bit tall on the wrist, and it wears slightly tanky, but overall wearability is quite strong here with this watch because of the quite short lug to lug and of course the 39mm diameter. IWC doesn't really have a watch like this in their current lineup of pilot chronographs. It was kind of a big deal when they brought a case down to 41mm millimeters, but even there, the long lug and thick case make it a very different story on the wrist compared to something like this. Overall, though, this watch shows a focus that I would love to see IWC bring back to some of their modern tool watches, and I think they have a great opportunity to do so whenever they come back to the Aquatimer collection. Old school Aquatimers are watches that we will come to at some point on this channel. They're watches that I have a deep appreciation and love for, so keep an eye out for that. But I'd love to see a modern version of that kind of go back to the roots, and everything that I see represented in this 3706 is also apparent in the Aquatimers of the same era. This 3706 represents a great value and really celebrates the heritage of IWC. They've come a long way since then, and they still make some great watches these days, of course. I'll leave a link to our review of the new IWC Ingenieur below if you want to check that out. This is a very different proposition, though, and for that, I kind of love it. I'd love to hear what you think about the 3706 and the 3705. Have you had experience with either of these watches? Let me know down in the comments below. Additionally, let me know what other old school IWC watches you'd like to see revisited here on the channel. I have a lot more of my thoughts on the 3706 now live over on thedeeptrack.com. I'll leave a link to that down below. If you enjoy this content, a like and a share goes a long way, and if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care.